and it's the same argument I make internationally in countries that are still repressing women. Saying, your society cannot work, it doesn't work if more than half your population is constrained. If the half of that population that is most likely to be raising your children and teaching the next generation is not getting opportunity. Your society will fail over the long term. And that's just true generally. Alright, one last question. Question, what happens? President Obama, excuse me, you were not called on. So, let's just see it's a gentleman's turn. This gentleman right there. Question, hi, my name is Seth. I'm a 3L. If you don't mind me reading my question. President Obama, it's okay. This is what I was saying about you guys and your phones. By the way, are you now? I'm assuming you can't carry your phones into court, can you? Question, actually, it depends. President Obama, I'm going to say, you guys might want to practice. Question, I'll try to work on that. President Obama, I think that's a great question, although I will say that I will dispute some of the underlying premises that you asserted as facts. But I think it's an important topic, and it's a fair one. When I came into office, we were still in the midst of two wars, in Iraq and Afghanistan. and in the border regions between Afghanistan and Pakistan, Al-Qaeda was still highly active. And drone technologies began to develop in parallel with had developed prior to my presidency. But started to really accelerate in terms of the technology and the precision with which strikes could be taken. And the challenge for me as Commander-in-Chief has consistently been, how do you think about this new technology in a way that is consistent with morality, ideals, laws of war? But is also consistent with my first priority as President and Commander-in-Chief, which is to keep all of you safe, including you. And so I think it's fair to say that in the first couple of years of my presidency, the architecture, legal architecture, administrative architecture, command structures around how these were utilized was underdeveloped relative to how fast the technology was moving. So another way of saying this is our military or our intelligence teams started seeing this as really effective. And they started just going because the goal was, let's get Al-Qaeda, let's get these leaders. There's a training. Camp here. There's a high-value target there. Let's move. And it was, the decision-making was not ad hoc. But it was embedded in decisions that are made all the time about a commander leading a military operation. Or an intelligence team trying to take out a terrorist. And there wasn't enough of an overarching structure, right? So you may recall, but if not, I'm sure we can send it to you. I gave a speech at the National Defense University, in which I said that we have to create an architecture for this, because the potential for abuse given the remoteness of these weapons and their lethality. We've got to come up with a structure that governs how we're approaching it. And that's what we've done. So I put forward what's called a presidential directive. It's basically a set of administrative guidelines whereby these weapons are being used. Now, we actually did put forward a non-classified version of what those directives look like. And it says that you can't use these weapons unless you have near certainty that there will not be civilian casualties. That you have near certainty that the targets you are hitting are in fact, terrorist organizations that are intending to do imminent harm to the United States. And you've got all the agencies who are involved in that process, they have to get together and approve that. And it goes to the highest, most senior levels of our government in order for us to make those decisions. And what I've also said that we need to start creating a process whereby public accountability is introduced so that you or citizens or members of Congress outside of the intelligence committee can look at the facts and see whether or not we're abiding by what we say are these norms. And there's a lot of legal aspects to this because part of the problem here is that this drone program initially came through the intelligence side under classified programs, as opposed to the military. Part of what I've also said is I don't want our intelligence agencies being a paramilitary organization. That's not their function. As much as possible this should be done through our Defense Department so that we can report. Here's what we did, here's why we did it, here's our assessment of what happened. And so slowly we are pushing it in that direction. My hope is that by the time I leave office there is not only an internal structure in place that governs these standards that we've set, but there is also an institutionalized process whereby the actions that the US government takes through drone technology are consistently reported on an annualized basis so that people can look and the reason this is really important to me, and this was implied in your question, is there is a lot of misinformation about this. There is no doubt, and I said this in an interview I think recently. There is no doubt that some innocent people have been killed by drone strikes. It is not true that it has been this sort of willy-nilly, let's bomb a village. That is not how folks have operated. And what I can say with great certainty is that the rate of civilian casualties in any drone operation are far lower than the rate of civilian casualties that occur in conventional war. So the irony, let's take an example like the Bin Laden raid. This was as precise, as effective an operation that I don't think anybody would dispute was in the national security interests of the United States. And we put our best people in there who operate as precisely and as effectively as any group of individuals probably ever have in the history of the planet. And they executed their mission flawlessly. But there were a number of people who were killed in that who you might describe as not the targets of the mission members of Bin Laden's family, for example. Now, that would be counted as a civilian casualty under the standards from which you drew your information. And if you calculated it as a percent, there was actually a pretty high civilian casualty rate for this extraordinarily precise mission. Now, imagine during the height of the Iraq War, or when we were still actively fighting in Afghanistan. The number of civilians who were killed in normal military operations. We talk about the number of US troops that were killed in Iraq. The number of Iraqis that were killed. Primarily by AQI and those we were fighting, but also by US military that was trying to be as careful as possible in chaotic situations like Fallujah or Ramadi were in the tens of thousands. So part of my job as president is to figure out how I can keep America safe, doing the least damage possible in really tough, bad situations. And I don't have the luxury of just not doing anything and then being able to stand back and feel as if my conscience is completely clear. I have to make decisions because there are folks out there who are genuinely trying to kill us and would. Be happy to blow up this entire room without any compunction, and are actively trying to find ways to do it. And I wish I could just send in Iron Man. No, no, I don't mean that as a joke. I just mean I wish that the tragedy of war, conflict, terrorism, etc., did not end up creating circumstances where we wielding kinetic power, don't end up hurting anybody who shouldn't have been hurt. But what I try to do is to set up the system as best as I can. And I think it is very important for those who are critics of the US government, and this includes folks on the outside to examine the incredible progress that we've made over the course of a couple of decades. Because this conversation didn't even exist. It did not even cross the minds of people in the White House as recently as 30 or 40 years ago. I mean, it wasn't even a factor. And we anguish over this in a very serious way. But what I do think is a legitimate concern is that the transparency issues. I think that the way that this got built up through our intelligence and what's called our title. "50 programs meant that it wasn't subject to the same amount of democratic debate. As when we are conducting what are called Title 10 Department of Defense conventional operations. And that's done a disservice not only to the public being able to examine where we made mistakes and create corrective action. It's actually also done a disservice to the incredibly dedicated men and women. In intelligence and in operations who perform these operations, who are subject to accusations that somehow they're irresponsible and bloodless and going around blowing up children, which is not the case. And our popular media, I think, has been able to just project a whole bunch of scenarios that are generally not accurate. I guess I should stop there. But thank you for the question. It was a legitimate one. I'll end where I started. Just based on the quality of the questions, and you're very sharp. Appearances, you guys have an enormous amount to contribute. Don't let the day-to-day noise and news and frustrations with our democracy discourage you from being involved.